The lamp oil had burned lower than Delilah Vaughn's hope when she first heard the rumors that Vincent Kane was riding back to Red Cloud, Nebraska, after 3 years of silence that felt like 3 lifetimes. She had been 19 when he left, barely a woman, standing in her father's general store arranging bolts of calico fabric while Vincent walked in smelling of leather and horses, and something wild that made her heart stutter in her chest. He had been 22 then, a hired hand at the Morrison Ranch with ambitions bigger than the endless prairie sky. His eyes were the color of storm clouds gathering over the sandhills, and when he looked at her that first time, really looked at her, Delilah felt the entire world shift beneath her feet like the earth itself was rearranging to make room for what they might become. "Miss Vaughn," he had said, tipping his hat with calloused fingers that she would later learn could be impossibly gentle. "I need 3 yards of that blue cotton there. My mother's birthday is coming." She had measured the fabric with trembling hands, acutely aware of how close he stood, how the shop suddenly felt too small and too warm. When she cut the cloth, her scissors slipped and she nicked her thumb. Blood welled up, a bright red bead against her pale skin. Vincent had caught her hand before she could pull away, wrapping his bandana around the small cut with a concentration that made her breath catch. "Got to be more careful," he said softly, and when he looked up at her, something passed between them that had nothing to do with injured thumbs or cotton fabric. That was how it started. Simple, ordinary, and completely extraordinary all at once. He began finding excuses to come to the store. He needed buttons. He needed thread. He needed writing paper, lamp oil, a new belt, anything that would give him a reason to stand at that wooden counter and talk to her while her father pretended not to notice from his place near the window where he read his newspaper and kept one eye on his only daughter. Delilah lived for those visits. She would wake early to pin her dark hair more carefully, to press her dress, to pinch color into her cheeks. Her mother had died when she was 12. Leaving just her and her father in the rooms above the store, and the loneliness that had settled into those spaces like dust seemed to lift whenever Vincent walked through the door. 3 months after that first meeting, he asked if he could walk her to the church social. Her father had frowned but nodded, extracting a promise from Vincent to have her home before 10. They had walked through the September evening while crickets sang in the tall grass, and the first stars appeared overhead, and Vincent told her about his plans to save enough money to buy his own land, to build something that mattered, to make a life worth living. "I want to do it right," he said, stopping on the dirt road and turning to face her. The last light was fading from the sky, painting everything gold and amber. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves good things." "You already are," Delilah said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. It was her first kiss, and she knew with absolute certainty it would be the only first kiss that ever mattered. When he pulled back, his hand still cupping her cheek, he smiled at her in a way that made her feel like the most important person in the entire world. "Delilah Vaughn," he whispered, "I think I'm going to love you for the rest of my life." "I think I'm going to let you," she whispered back. For a year, they built something beautiful together. He would finish his work at the Morrison Ranch and ride into town, tie his horse outside the store, and spend whatever time he could steal with her. They walked along the railroad tracks at sunset. They sat on the bench outside the church after services, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to skip stones in the Platte River, laughing when her attempts plopped straight down into the water. She read him poetry from a book her mother had left her, watching his face soften as he listened to words about love and longing and forever. Her father warmed to him gradually. Vincent was respectful, hardworking, honest to a fault. He never tried to rush Delilah, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. When he asked permission to court her officially, her father had studied him for a long moment before extending his hand. "You hurt her, and I will make you regret you were ever born," her father said calmly. "Sir, if I ever hurt her, I will save you the trouble and regret it enough for both of us," Vincent replied. They shook hands, and Delilah felt her heart might burst from sheer joy. But then Robert Morrison, the ranch owner, came to Vincent with an opportunity that seemed too good to refuse. There was a cattle drive to Montana, a chance to earn serious money in a few months, enough to make a real down payment on land. Morrison trusted Vincent, wanted him as the trail boss for the operation. It was dangerous work, hard work, but the pay would set Vincent up properly. "I could come back with enough to buy that parcel by Cedar Creek," Vincent told Delilah, his hands holding hers tightly as they sat on the porch of the store after closing. It was late March, and the wind still carried the bite of winter. "We could start building a house. I could ask your father for your hand properly, with something real to offer." Delilah felt cold fear slide through her veins despite the warmth of his hands. "How long would you be gone?" "4 months, maybe 5. I would be back by September at the latest." 4 months felt like an eternity, but she could see the hope in his eyes, the future he was building for them in his mind. How could she ask him to give that up out of her own fear? "Promise me you will be careful," she said, squeezing his hands. "Promise me you will come back." "Delilah, wild horses could not keep me from coming back to you." He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you. That is the one true thing in this world. Everything else is just details." "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared. I will always come back to you. Always." He left on the 1st of April, riding out with a crew of 15 men and 2,000 head of cattle. Delilah stood outside the store and watched him go, one hand raised in farewell, fighting the urge to run after him and beg him to stay. He turned in his saddle when he reached the edge of town, his hat in his hand, and she could see him even at that distance, could feel his eyes on her. Then he was gone, disappearing into the vast open country, and she was alone. The first month was bearable. She kept herself busy in the store, helped her father with inventory, sewed new curtains for the parlor. She wrote Vincent letters even though she had no way to send them, pouring her heart onto paper, telling him about her days, about how the apple tree behind the store had bloomed, about how Mrs. Henderson had her baby, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs. The second month was harder. She took to walking down to the train platform each evening, just to feel closer to the world beyond Red Cloud, to imagine Vincent out there somewhere under the same sky. The platform was nothing fancy, just rough wooden planks and a small shelter, but the trains that stopped there connected to everywhere, to possibility, to the future. The third month brought a letter, dusty and worn from travel. Vincent had given it to a trader heading south, and through a series of unlikely handoffs, it made its way to her. His handwriting was rough but readable. "My dearest Delilah, we are making good time despite trouble with weather and a river crossing that nearly cost us 50 head. I think of you every morning when I wake and every night before I sleep. You are the reason I keep going when everything else seems too hard. The land here is beautiful but empty. It needs you in it to mean anything. Wait for me. I am coming home as fast as I can. All my love, Vincent." She read that letter until she had it memorized, until the paper began to tear at the creases. Wait for me. She would wait forever if she had to. September came and he did not. She tried not to worry. Cattle drives ran long sometimes. There could be delays. But October arrived with the first frost and still no word. November brought snow, and her father began to look at her with pity that made her want to scream. "Maybe he is wintering somewhere," her father said gently. "Travel gets difficult this time of year." "He promised he would come back," Delilah said, staring out the store window at the empty street. "I know, sweetheart, I know." December was agony. She went to the train platform every evening as the sun set, standing there as the temperature dropped and the wind cut through her coat. She told herself that if she kept the faith, if she refused to give up, he would come. The platform master, old George Tucker, began lighting the lamps early when he saw her coming, giving her sympathetic looks that she ignored. "Miss Vaughn, you should not be out here in this cold," he said one particularly bitter evening. "I am waiting for someone," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "I know, but you have been waiting an awful long time. Then a little longer will not matter." January of 1878 brought news that broke something inside her. A man came through Red Cloud, a drover who had been on a different cattle drive, and he stopped in her father's store to buy tobacco. He got to talking the way travelers do and mentioned hearing about a stampede up in Montana Territory back in late September. A bad one. Several men killed, he said. The crew had scattered after that, the drive falling apart. "Did you hear any names?" Delilah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man shook his head. "Sorry, miss, just heard it was a Morrison outfit out of Nebraska. Real tragedy." After he left, Delilah walked upstairs to her room, closed the door, and allowed herself to cry for the first time since Vincent had ridden away. She cried until she had nothing left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen, until the grief felt like it might tear her apart from the inside. Her father found her there hours later, curled on her bed in the dark. "He might not have been with them," her father said softly, sitting beside her and stroking her hair like he had when she was a little girl. "It might have been a different Morrison crew. He would have written if he was alive," Delilah said into her pillow. "He would have found a way to let me know. Maybe he is trying. Mail is not reliable out here, you know that." But weeks turned into months and spring came again with no word. Delilah moved through her days like a ghost, doing what needed to be done but feeling nothing. She stopped going to the train platform. She stopped writing letters to a man who would never read them. She packed away the blue dress she had been saving for his homecoming and tried to teach herself how to stop hoping. In June of 1878, Thomas Brennan started coming around the store. He was a banker's son, respectable and boring and utterly safe. Her father encouraged it gently, seeing a future for his daughter that did not involve waiting for a dead man. Delilah allowed Thomas to take her to church socials, to walk her home, to talk about his prospects. She felt nothing for him, but nothing felt better than the constant ache of loss. Then one scorching afternoon in late July, Sarah Morrison came into the store, Robert Morrison's wife, looking uncomfortable and determined. "Miss Vaughn, I need to speak with you," she said quietly. Delilah's heart began to pound. "Is it about Vincent Kane?" Sarah nodded. "My husband just got a letter from Montana. Vincent is alive." The world tilted. Delilah grabbed the counter to steady herself. "What?" "He was injured in the stampede, very badly. He has been in a hospital in Helena all this time. He could not write, could not travel. But he is recovering now, and he asked Morrison if you were still here if you were." Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "If you were still waiting." Delilah could not breathe. "Alive." Vincent was alive. "Did he say when he was coming back?" Sarah's expression turned pitying. "Delilah, he is not sure he should come back. He wrote that he has nothing, that the drive fell apart and he lost everything, including almost his life. He does not want to return to you empty-handed, broken." He said perhaps it would be better if he started over somewhere else, let you move on with your life. Fury and relief and desperate love crashed through Delilah in equal measure. Where is he? I need the address. I do not think you understand. He was trampled badly. My husband says he may never work as a drover again. He is living in a boarding house, taking whatever odd jobs he can find. He has nothing to offer you. I do not care about any of that. I need to know where he is. Sarah studied her for a long moment, then pulled a piece of paper from her handbag and handed it over. It had an address in Helena, Montana Territory. That night, Delilah sat down and wrote a letter that came from the deepest part of her heart. Vincent, I do not care if you have nothing. I do not care if you are broken. I only care that you are alive. Come home. Please come home. I have waited this long. I will wait however much longer it takes, but I need you to come back to me. I love you. That has not changed, and it never will. Yours always, Delilah. She mailed it the next morning and went back to waiting. August passed. September came again, marking 2 full years since he was supposed to return. October arrived with its crisp air and turning leaves. Delilah went back to her evening vigil at the train platform, unable to help herself. If he came, it would be by train. She needed to be there. George Tucker lit the lamps for her without comment now, understanding that some things went beyond reason into the realm of faith. On a Tuesday evening in late October, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Delilah stood on that platform like she had stood there so many times before. The westbound train was due, though it was often late. She pulled her shawl tighter against the autumn chill and watched the empty track stretch toward the horizon. The train appeared as a dark spot in the distance, growing larger, its whistle cutting through the quiet evening. It pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and a hiss of steam. Delilah watched passengers disembark, her heart clenching with each unfamiliar face. Then she saw him. He was thinner than she remembered, moving with a slight limp, his left arm held carefully against his ribs. He had a beard now, and new lines around his eyes that spoke of pain and hardship. But when he looked up and saw her standing there on that platform, his whole face transformed with such joy and relief that she felt tears spring to her eyes. "Delilah," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered, rough and warm and home. She ran to him, propriety forgotten, and he caught her with his good arm, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. She did not care. She held him just as tightly, her face pressed against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, solid and real and alive. "You waited," he whispered against her hair. "After everything, you waited." "I told you I would," she said, pulling back just enough to look at his face. She touched his cheek gently, needing to confirm he was real. "I told you I would wait. I have nothing, Delilah. I am not the man I was when I left. I cannot work cattle anymore. My ribs healed wrong, my leg will always be bad. I have $43 to my name and no prospects. You should not want me anymore. Vincent Kane, you are the only thing I have ever wanted. I do not care about money or land or prospects. I care about you. Just you." He kissed her then, there on the platform as George Tucker discreetly turned away and the other passengers pretended not to notice. He kissed her like a man who had traveled through hell to find his way home, and she kissed him back with 2 years of longing and love and desperate relief. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. "Marry me," Vincent said. "I know I should wait, should build something first, but I cannot. I have already lost too much time. Marry me, Delilah. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Her father was surprised but not displeased when they came to him that evening. He looked Vincent over carefully, noting the injuries, the weariness, the empty pockets, and then he looked at his daughter's face, radiant with happiness for the first time in 2 years. "You will live here above the store until you can afford better," he said gruffly. "And you will work in the store with me. The pay is not much, but it is steady." Vincent extended his hand. "Sir, I accept gratefully, and I promise you I will take care of her. See that you do. I cannot handle watching her grieve like that again. You will never have to. I am never leaving her again." They were married 3 weeks later in the small white church on the edge of town, with half of Red Cloud in attendance. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Sarah Morrison had helped her gather. Vincent wore a new suit that her father had insisted on buying, and when he saw Delilah walking down the aisle toward him, his eyes filled with tears. The Reverend kept the ceremony simple. When it came time for the vows, Vincent's voice shook with emotion. "I promise to love you, to honor you, to stay by your side through whatever comes. I promise to be worthy of your faith in me. I promise to make you happy every single day I have breath in my body." Delilah could barely speak through her own tears. "I promise to love you always, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. I promise to stand beside you, to believe in you, to build a life with you that is true and good." "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend said with a smile. "Vincent, you may kiss your bride." And he did, tenderly and thoroughly, while the congregation cheered. The reception was held in the church hall, with tables of food contributed by neighbors and friends. There was fiddle music and dancing, and Vincent held Delilah close for every slow song, ignoring the pain in his leg, focused only on the woman in his arms. "I love you, Mrs. Kane," he whispered into her ear. "I love you too, Mr. Kane," she whispered back, and felt his smile against her temple. That night, in the small bedroom above her father's store that was now their bedroom, they came together with a tenderness and passion that felt sacred. Vincent was careful with her, gentle, making sure she felt cherished and loved. Delilah had been nervous, but with him, everything felt right and natural and perfect. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Vincent's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I thought about this so many times in Montana," he said quietly. "When I was hurt, when I thought I might die, all I could think about was you, how you smiled, how you laughed, the way you scrunch your nose when you are concentrating. I held onto those memories like a drowning man holds onto a rope." "Tell me what happened," Delilah said softly. "You do not have to if it is too painful, but I want to know." He was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak. The stampede had happened during a thunderstorm, the cattle spooked by lightning. Vincent had been trying to turn the herd when his horse went down, throwing him directly into the path of 2,000 panicked animals. He remembered the impact, the crushing weight, the pain beyond anything he had imagined. Then nothing. He woke up 3 weeks later in a charity hospital in Helena, his body a mass of injuries. Broken ribs, a shattered leg, internal damage the doctors could not fully explain. They told him he was lucky to be alive. He did not feel lucky. He felt broken and useless and terrified that he would never be whole again. The recovery was long and agonizing. He had no money for proper care, so he was shuffled to a boarding house as soon as he could walk, given over to the charity of strangers. He took jobs he could manage with his injuries, washing dishes, sweeping floors, anything to survive. Every day he thought of Delilah, and every day he convinced himself more thoroughly that he should let her go. "I thought you deserved better than a crippled cowboy with nothing," he said, his voice rough. "I thought you would move on, find someone whole and successful." When Morrison's letter arrived asking if I was alive, I almost did not respond. But I had to know. I had to know if you were happy. And when you found out I was still waiting, I knew I had to come back, even if just to see you one more time, to explain, to let you release me properly. I never imagined you would still want me. Delilah propped herself up on her elbow and looked down at him, her hair falling around them like a curtain. Vincent Kane, you are the only man I have ever loved or will ever love. Whole or broken, rich or poor, I choose you. I will always choose you. He pulled her down into a kiss that said everything words could not. The months that followed were not easy, but they were happy. Vincent worked in the store alongside Delilah and her father, learning the business, discovering he had a knack for numbers and inventory that surprised all of them. His leg pained him on cold days, and he could not lift the heavy crates, but he managed the books, dealt with suppliers, and slowly began to build the store's profits through careful management. Delilah had never been happier. Having Vincent beside her every day, waking up next to him each morning, falling asleep in his arms each night, it was everything she had dreamed of during those long months of waiting. They talked about everything, shared everything, built a partnership that went beyond romance into true companionship. In February, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening after the store closed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby in there," she said, watching his face. His expression went through shock, disbelief, and then pure, unadulterated joy. "Truly, truly, you are going to be a father." He kissed her with such enthusiasm that he knocked over a display of canned goods, sending them rolling across the floor. They laughed as they picked them up, stealing kisses between cans of beans and peaches, giddy with happiness. "A baby," Vincent kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." Delilah's father took the news with gruff pleasure, immediately beginning to plan for how they would need more space, perhaps build an addition to the living quarters upstairs. Vincent threw himself into the project, working with a carpenter to design a proper nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow, building a cradle from scratch despite his limited mobility. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Delilah tired more quickly than usual. Vincent was attentive to the point of being comical, insisting she sit down constantly, bringing her food and water, fretting over every twinge and ache. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she teased him. "You are carrying the most precious thing in the world," he countered. "I am allowed to worry." In October of 1879, exactly 1 year after Vincent had stepped off that train, Delilah gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced the floor downstairs while the midwife worked, convinced something would go wrong, that he would lose them both. But when the baby's cry filled the air, strong and healthy, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife called him up, and he entered the bedroom to find Delilah exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your daughter," she said softly. Vincent approached slowly, almost afraid, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blanket. She had wispy dark hair and her eyes were closed, her tiny fist waving in the air. "She is perfect," he whispered, touching one finger to her impossibly small hand. She gripped it reflexively, and he felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Grace," Delilah said. "Grace Victoria Kane, because Grace brought you back to me." Vincent blinked back tears. "Grace, it is perfect. She is perfect. You are perfect." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Delilah placed the baby in his arms. Vincent held her like she might shatter, marveling at how small she was, how vulnerable, how absolutely beautiful. "Hello, Grace," he said softly. "I am your papa, And I promise you, I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life, to make you proud, to be the father you deserve." The baby made a small noise and Vincent laughed, the sound full of joy and wonder. Delilah watched her husband holding their daughter and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what she had been waiting for, not just Vincent's return, but this moment, this family, this perfect completeness. Grace proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and eating enthusiastically. Delilah brought her downstairs in a basket during store hours, and customers delighted in cooing over her. Vincent managed to balance his work with being a devoted father, always ready to pick Grace up when she fussed, to walk her around the store singing softly until she calmed. Delilah's father, now a grandfather, softened even further. He carved toys for Grace, told her stories, spoiled her shamelessly. The rooms above the store rang with laughter and love in a way they had not since Delilah's mother died. As Grace grew, Vincent continued to heal, both physically and emotionally. The nightmares from the stampede came less frequently. His leg would always trouble him, but he learned to work around it. More importantly, he learned to see himself not as broken, but as a man who had survived, who had built something good from the wreckage. The store thrived under his management. He negotiated better prices with suppliers, expanded their inventory, brought in new customers. By the time Grace was 2, they had saved enough to purchase the building outright from the man who had been renting it to Delilah's father. "We own it," Vincent said, staring at the deed in disbelief. "We actually own it." "You did that," Delilah said, kissing his cheek. "Your hard work, your intelligence, you built this for us." "We built it together," he corrected. "Everything we have, we built together." When Grace was 3, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was not surprised, just quietly happy. Vincent's reaction was, if possible, even more enthusiastic than the first time. "Another baby," he kept saying, grinning like a fool. "Grace is going to be a big sister." Grace, when told, was very concerned. "But where will the baby sleep?" she asked seriously. "We will make room," Vincent assured her. "There is always room for love." Their son, Victor James Kane, was born in March of 1883, arriving quickly and easily in contrast to Grace's difficult birth. He came out wailing, red-faced and furious, and did not stop making noise for what felt like months. "He has your temper," Delilah told Vincent dryly as they tried to soothe the crying infant at 2 in the morning. "He has your determination," Vincent countered, bouncing Victor gently. "He knows what he wants and he is not going to stop until he gets it." Grace was an excellent big sister, always wanting to help, to hold the baby, to bring him toys. She would sing to him the same songs Vincent had sung to her, and sometimes, miraculously, Victor would quiet and listen. With 2 children and a thriving business, life was full and busy and chaotic and wonderful. Vincent and Delilah fell into bed exhausted each night and woke up to do it all again, and neither would have changed a thing. On a quiet Sunday afternoon when Victor was 6 months old, Vincent suggested they take a walk as a family. They bundled up the children and headed out, strolling through town. Vincent led them to the train platform, and Delilah realized where they were going. "I have not been here in years," she said softly as they climbed up onto the platform. "I know. I thought maybe it was time." They stood there, Grace holding Vincent's hand and Victor asleep in Delilah's arms, looking at the same tracks where they had reunited. "I think about that night all the time," Vincent said quietly. "How you were just standing here waiting like you had been waiting forever. How I almost did not come because I was afraid and stupid. How close I came to losing the best thing that ever happened to me." "But you did come," Delilah said, leaning against his shoulder. "You came back just like you promised." because you never stopped believing I would. You stood on this platform until the lamps lit because leaving meant I was never coming. You kept the faith even when I could not. I loved you. I still love you. That was never in question. Grace tugged on Vincent's hand. Papa, why are we here? Vincent picked her up, settling her on his hip despite the twinge in his bad leg. Because this is a special place, sweetheart. This is where your mama's faith brought me home. This is where our family really began. Tell me the story, Grace demanded. She had heard it before many times, but she never tired of it. So Vincent told her, with Delilah adding details about the cattle drive and the stampede and the long separation. About the letters and the waiting and the moment when they saw each other again after so much time apart. And you were not scared, Grace asked her mother. I was terrified, Delilah admitted, but I was more scared of giving up on your papa than I was of waiting. That is very brave, Grace said solemnly. Your mama is the bravest person I know, Vincent said, looking at Delilah with such love that she felt her breath catch even after all these years. They stayed until the evening train came through, letting Grace watch with wide eyes as it pulled in and passengers disembarked. Then they walked home together, a family, complete and happy. The years continued to roll forward. Grace grew into a bright, curious child who loved reading and asked a million questions. Victor grew into an energetic boy who wanted to climb everything and explore everywhere. Delilah's father eventually stepped back from the store, content to spend his time with his grandchildren, teaching them checkers and telling them stories about their grandmother. Vincent expanded the business, opening a second location in a nearby town and hiring good people to run it. He proved to have a gift for commerce, for understanding what people needed and how to provide it. Money, while never abundant, was steady and sufficient. They built a proper house on the edge of town, with a big kitchen and bedrooms for each child and a porch where they could sit in the evenings. But they kept the rooms above the store, unable to let go of the place where they had built their life together. When Grace turned 8, she asked her father about his limp, something she had never really questioned before. They were sitting on the porch, shelling peas together, and Vincent considered his answer carefully. I was hurt very badly a long time ago, he said, before you were born. I was not sure I would walk again, let alone have a life worth living. But your mother never gave up on me, and eventually I stopped giving up on myself. The limp is a reminder of that, a reminder that even broken things can be mended. Does it hurt? Grace asked. Sometimes, but it is a small price to pay for everything I have. For you and your brother and your mother. For this life. Grace leaned against him and he put his arm around her, feeling blessed beyond measure. In the summer of 1888, when Grace was 9 and Victor was 5, they took a trip. Vincent had been planning it for months, saving money, making arrangements. He wanted to show Delilah Montana, the place where he had nearly died, the place he had rebuilt himself before coming home to her. They took the train, the children vibrating with excitement at the adventure. The journey took several days, and Vincent pointed out landmarks, told stories, showed them the vast expanse of the country. Helena was bigger than Red Cloud, busier and louder. They stayed in a modest hotel, and Vincent took them to see the hospital where he had recovered, the boarding house where he had lived, the church where he had sat and prayed for guidance about whether to return to Nebraska. This is where I wrote you that letter, he told Delilah, standing outside a small shop. The one where I said I had nothing to offer you. And this is where I decided you were an idiot, Delilah said affectionately, because you were always enough, even with nothing. They visited the cemetery where the men who died in the stampede were buried. Vincent stood in front of the markers, hat in hand, silent for a long moment. Delilah took his free hand and squeezed. I should have been with them, he said quietly, By all rights, I should be here, but you are not. You survived for a reason." He looked down at Grace and Victor, holding hands and looking at the gravestones with solemn faces. "I know the reason now. Before they left Helena, Vincent took them to a piece of land outside of town, a pretty spot with trees and a creek running through it. 'This is where I thought I would build something,' he said. 'When I was still planning to stay here to start over somewhere new, but it never felt right. It was not home.' 'Because home is where the people you love are,' Delilah said. 'Exactly.' They spread a blanket and had a picnic there, the children playing in the creek while Vincent and Delilah sat close together watching. 'Do you ever regret it?' Vincent asked. 'The waiting, the years we lost, the struggle?' Delilah looked at him in surprise. 'Never, not for a single moment. Every hard thing we went through led us here to this life, to this family. How could I regret that? I am a lucky man,' Vincent said softly. 'We are both lucky,' Delilah corrected. 'We found each other and we held on and we built something real. That is not luck, that is choice. Every day we choose each other.' 'Every day,' Vincent agreed, and kissed her while their children shrieked with laughter in the background. They returned to Red Cloud at the end of summer, tanned and happy and full of stories. The town felt like home in a way Montana never had, and Delilah was content to never leave again. Victor started school that fall, following in his sister's footsteps. Grace was already showing signs of her father's head for numbers, helping in the store after school, learning the business. Victor was more interested in building things, always constructing elaborate projects out of scrap wood. 'He reminds me of you,' Delilah told Vincent. 'Always working with your hands, creating something from nothing.' 'He is going to be a craftsman,' Vincent predicted. 'Maybe a carpenter or a blacksmith, something real and solid.' The years of the 1890s brought change to Red Cloud and to the Kane family. The railroad expanded, bringing more commerce and more people. The store flourished, becoming a central fixture of the town. Delilah's father passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1892, leaving everything to Delilah and Vincent. They mourned him deeply, but took comfort in knowing he had spent his last years surrounded by love and family. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman, intelligent and kind, with her mother's dark hair and her father's storm-cloud eyes. Young men started coming around, but Grace was in no hurry, focused on her education and helping run the business. Victor grew tall and strong, apprenticing with the town's carpenter and showing real talent. He was quieter than his sister, more thoughtful, but with a dry sense of humor that could make anyone laugh. In 1895, on a crisp October evening, Vincent took Delilah's hand and led her back to the train platform. It had become a tradition of sorts, something they did on their anniversary, standing in the place where their life together had truly begun. The platform had been rebuilt over the years, made sturdier and larger, but it was still fundamentally the same. George Tucker had retired, replaced by a younger man, but the lamps were still lit the same way as dusk fell. 17 years, Vincent said, looking at those lamps. 17 years since I stepped off that train and saw you standing here. Best moment of my life, Delilah said softly. Mine too. Well, tied with a few others. Marrying you, the birth of our children. Every ordinary morning waking up next to you, she laughed. You have become quite the romantic in your old age. I was always a romantic. I just hit it better when I was young and stupid. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar colors. The evening train was late, as it often was, but they did not mind waiting. Do you remember what you said to me that night? Delilah asked. When you first saw me on the platform, I said your name, just your name, because seeing you there still waiting for me after everything, I could not think of anything else. You looked so scared. Like you thought I might turn you away. I was terrified. I thought you would take one look at the broken man I had become and realize you had waited for someone who no longer existed. But I did not. No, you saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. You always have." Delilah turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "Vincent Kane, you have given me the most wonderful life. You have been a devoted husband, an incredible father, a true partner in every sense. When I stood on this platform all those years ago, waiting for the lamps to light because leaving meant you were never coming, I could not have imagined how beautiful our life would become. But you exceeded every hope, every dream." Vincent's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are my miracle, Delilah, my second chance, my everything. I love you more today than I did 17 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for whatever years we have left." "I am going to hold you to that," she said, smiling through her own tears. He kissed her there on the platform as the train finally pulled in, its whistle sounding across the prairie. Passengers disembarked and hurried past them, but neither Vincent nor Delilah noticed. They were lost in each other in the moment, in the life they had built from hope and faith and stubborn, enduring love. When they finally pulled apart, Vincent kept his arm around her as they watched the train depart again, heading west into the gathering darkness. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." They walked back through the familiar streets of Red Cloud as the last light faded from the sky. Lamps were being lit in windows, smoke rising from chimneys, the sounds of families settling in for the evening all around them. Their own house stood on the corner, warm light spilling from the windows, and they could see Grace moving around in the kitchen preparing dinner, Victor reading at the table. "We did it," Delilah said softly as they stood outside, looking at their home. "We built something real and good." "We did," Vincent agreed. "Together." They went inside to their children, to the meal Grace had prepared, to the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of their family. They ate together, sharing stories about their days, laughing at Victor's jokes, listening to Grace's plans for expanding the store's inventory. After dinner, Vincent helped clean up while Delilah read from a new novel that had just come in stock. Victor worked on a carving project, his hands already showing the skill that would make him a master craftsman. Grace balanced the store's accounts, her quick mind making short work of the numbers. Later, when the children had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Vincent and Delilah sat together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. "Tell me what you are thinking," Delilah said, her head on his shoulder. "I am thinking about that platform," Vincent said. "About how you stood there night after night, waiting for something that might never come. About how your faith brought me home when I could not find the way myself." "I would do it again," Delilah said simply. "1,000 times over. I know. That is what makes you extraordinary." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one, listening to the distant sound of a train whistle as it passed through town. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Grace married at 22, a good man who ran the dry goods store 2 towns over. They merged the businesses and expanded even further, making the Kane name synonymous with quality and fair dealing throughout the region. Grace gave Vincent and Delilah 3 grandchildren, bright-eyed little ones who loved to visit and hear stories about the old days. Victor married at 24, a quiet woman who matched his temperament perfectly. They built a house on the edge of town with their own hands, every beam and board placed with care. Their 2 children were born there, and Victor taught them the craft of making things that would last. Vincent's injuries continued to trouble him as he aged, his limp becoming more pronounced, his bad ribs aching on cold mornings. But he never complained, counting each day as a gift he had not expected to receive. He worked in the store until he was 60, finally stepping back to let Grace take over fully, though he still came by most days to help with inventory and chat with customers who had known him for decades. Delilah aged gracefully, her dark hair turning silver, her face lined with years of smiling and laughing. She remained active in the church and the community, known for her kindness and her wisdom. Young brides often came to her for advice, and she always told them the same thing. Love is a choice you make every single day. Choose well and choose consistently, and you can weather any storm. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole town turned out for a celebration in the church hall. Grace and Victor had planned it, but it was the community that made it special. Tables overflowed with food, musicians played the old songs, and people lined up to share stories about how Vincent and Delilah had touched their lives. "They gave me my first job when I was just a boy," one man said. "Taught me the value of honest work and fair dealing. They helped us when the drought nearly broke us," a farmer's wife added. "Extended credit they had no reason to extend, kept us afloat until the rains came back. They showed us what real love looks like," a younger woman said shyly. "Watching them together gives me hope for my own marriage." Vincent and Delilah sat together at the head table, holding hands, overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. When it came time to speak, Vincent stood slowly, his cane helping him balance. "I do not deserve this," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "I am just a man who got very, very lucky. Lucky to survive when others did not. Lucky to find a woman who believed in me when I did not believe in myself. Lucky to build a life worth living." He looked down at Delilah, his eyes soft. "Every good thing I have, every moment of happiness, started the day I met this woman. She waited for me when she should not have. She loved me when I had nothing to offer. She chose me every single day for 40 years, and if God grants me more time, I will spend it trying to be worthy of that choice." Delilah stood and took his hand. "We chose each other," she said firmly. "And that choice, made over and over again through all the years, through all the struggles and joys, that is what built this life. Love is not a feeling that just happens. It is a decision, a commitment, a partnership. Vincent Kane has been my partner in the truest sense for 40 years, and I am grateful for every single day." The hall erupted in applause, and their children and grandchildren surrounded them, hugging them, celebrating them, a living testament to the power of stubborn, enduring love. The party went late into the night with dancing and stories and laughter. At one point, Vincent insisted on dancing with Delilah despite his bad leg. She protested gently, worried he would hurt himself, but he would not be dissuaded. "I dance with you at our wedding," he said. "I am going to dance with you at our 40th anniversary." So they moved slowly around the floor, barely more than swaying in place, but it did not matter. They were together, surrounded by the life they had built, and that was everything. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Vincent and Delilah found themselves alone for a moment in the quiet hall. The musicians had packed up, the tables had been cleared, and it was just the two of them in the space where they had been married 4 decades earlier. 40 years, Delilah said wonderingly. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean. Sometimes I still feel like that scared young man stepping off the train, hoping against hope that you would want me. And I am still the girl on the platform, waiting for the lamps to light because leaving meant you were never coming." Vincent pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the familiar comfort of her body against his. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting, for believing." for building this life with me. Thank you for coming back, she whispered in return, for not giving up, for being the man I always knew you were. They stood there in the quiet, holding each other until Grace came to collect them and take them home. Vincent lived to be 72 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep on a winter morning in 1907. Delilah woke to find him beside her, his face relaxed and peaceful, and she knew immediately that he was gone. The grief was immense, crushing, but underneath it was gratitude for the 50 years they had shared, for every moment, every memory, every choice that had led them to each other and kept them together. The funeral was the largest Red Cloud had ever seen. People came from towns all over the region to pay their respects to a man who had been known for his integrity, his kindness, his devotion to his family and community. Grace and Victor stood on either side of their mother, strong and steady, while grandchildren clung to her skirts. During the service, Delilah stood and spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. "My husband was not a perfect man," she said, "but he was a good man. He was a man who kept his promises, who loved deeply and completely, who built something meaningful from the wreckage of disaster. When he left Red Cloud all those years ago, he promised he would come back, and he did. Against all odds, through injury and hardship and doubt, he kept that promise. That was who Vincent Kane was, a man of his word, a man of honor, a man who made me believe in forever." She paused, looking at the casket holding the man she had loved for more than half a century. "I stood on that train platform so many evenings, waiting for the lamps to light, because I believed in him. I believed he would come home, and he did. He came home and gave me the most beautiful life I could have imagined. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment. Not the waiting, not the struggling, not the aging. All of it was worth it to love him and be loved by him." There was not a dry eye in the church. They buried Vincent in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Red Cloud with a simple headstone that read, "Vincent Kane, 1855–1907. Beloved husband, father, and friend, he kept his promises." Delilah visited the grave every day for the rest of her life, talking to Vincent about their children, their grandchildren, the business, the town. She told him how much she missed him, how the world felt smaller and colder without him in it, but also how grateful she was for every year they had shared. She lived another 12 years, dying in 1919 at the age of 80. Grace found her in the morning, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, a letter in her lap. It was one of the letters Vincent had written her from Montana all those years ago, worn from being read and reread countless times. They buried her next to Vincent, and on her headstone they inscribed, "Delilah Vaughn Kane, 1839–1919. Beloved wife, mother, and friend. She kept the faith." At the funeral, Grace spoke about her parents, her voice breaking with emotion but also filled with pride. "My mother taught me what it means to love someone completely," she said. "To stand firm in that love even when everything seems hopeless. She waited for my father when anyone else would have given up. She built a life with him that was grounded in commitment and partnership and unwavering devotion. They were not rich, they were not famous, but they were happy. They chose each other every single day, and that choice created ripples that extended far beyond their own lives." She looked out at the crowd, at her own children and grandchildren, at the community that her parents had helped build. "We are all here because they loved each other well, because they showed us what it means to keep your word, to honor your commitments, to build something lasting. That is their legacy. That is what they leave behind." After the funeral, Victor took Grace to the train platform. It was much different now than it had been in 1878, modernized and expanded, but the essence was the same. "You remember the story." Victor asked his sister as they stood looking at the tracks. Of course. Mother standing here night after night, waiting for father to come home. The lamps lighting as darkness fell, how she refused to leave because leaving meant he was never coming. It is a good story, Victor said quietly. A true one, about faith and love and the kind of devotion people do not see much anymore. It is our story too, in a way, Grace said. Everything we are, everything we have started here, with Mother's choice to keep believing. They stood in silence for a moment, then Grace placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the platform, the same kind that had been in Delilah's wedding bouquet. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to her parents or to the universe, or to the love that had brought them all into being. The sun set over Red Cloud, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. The lamps on the platform lit automatically now, electric instead of oil, but their glow was just as warm, just as welcoming. And somewhere, beyond the veil that separates this world from whatever comes next, Vincent and Delilah Kane stood together on a platform of their own, watching as the train pulled in, ready to carry them forward into eternity. His hand found hers naturally, their fingers interlacing with the ease of countless repetitions. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. "With you?" "Always," she replied. And together, they stepped aboard, moving forward into the endless forever they had earned through a lifetime of choosing each other, of keeping faith, of building love that would echo through generations. Behind them, in Red Cloud, Nebraska, the train platform stood solid and enduring, a monument to the power of waiting, of believing, of loving someone so completely that you refuse to let go even when every rational thought says you should. The lamps burned bright against the gathering darkness, just as they always had, just as they always would, keeping the faith for travelers yet to come, for love stories yet to be written, for all the hearts that would learn what Delilah and Vincent had known. That true love is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything you have to give. The evening train pulled into the station right on schedule, and passengers disembarked into the warm glow of the lamps, each one carrying their own stories, their own hopes, their own dreams of forever. And the platform stood witness to it all, just as it had stood witness to a young woman's vigil so many years before, when faith and love had been tested and proven true. The story of Vincent and Delilah Kane became legend in Red Cloud, passed down through generations. Parents told it to their children, who told it to theirs, a reminder that love is not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment, a daily decision to stand firm in belief even when circumstances suggest otherwise. The store that bore their name continued to operate for another 50 years, run by their descendants, a cornerstone of the community. The house they built stood strong and solid, sheltering generation after generation of their family. Their grandchildren's grandchildren walked the same streets, looked at the same prairie sky, and knew themselves to be part of something larger than any individual life. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Nebraska plains, some said you could still feel the presence of a woman standing on that train platform, watching the horizon, waiting for the lamps to light, keeping faith with a promise made long ago. Not a ghost, exactly, but an echo, a reminder, a testament to what enduring love can create. Because Delilah Vaughn had stood on that platform until the lamps lit, refusing to leave because leaving meant the cowboy was never coming. And Vincent Kane had come home, against all odds, drawn back by love that would not let him go. Together they had built a life, a family, a legacy that would outlast them both, and in the end that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.